immigration. Almost a decade ago, I used to work at the Tenement Museum in New York City. Has anybody here gone to the Tenement Museum or know about it? Oh, over here, okay. So the Tenement Museum is like a historical museum that takes you back. If you go to visit the museum, you kind of get taken back to the 1800s, late 1800s to early 1900s, to a time when Irish immigrants, Polish immigrants, Italian immigrants came to the United States. Most of them came through Ellis Island, and came to live in their working class. I'm talking about immigrants, the working class immigrants. They were working class immigrants who lived in tenements in very crowded housing, and they lived there, they worked there in places like garment factories, Tenement Museum kind of recreates the stories of some of the tenants, people who lived in these tenements, to show you what immigrant life used to look like in the Lower East Side of New York City. So when I used to work there, and the museum still exists now, for those who haven't been, I really highly recommend you go. We used to do these dialogues, and I don't know if those dialogue tours still exist, but after the tour you would go back to a small room, and I used to run the dialogue program. And we would have a conversation about the old immigration history and how old immigrants back in the day used to be and why they came to the United States, what brought them to the United States and how they lived and what their joys and sorrows were, to what the contemporary immigration life looks like. And it was always hard to make that comparison. There were people who were coming there to visit the tour, do the tour of their, because they had Irish and ancestors who also came to the United States, or they had Jewish, Polish ancestors who came to the United States, or Italian ancestors who came to the United States. So they wanted to kind of connect with how their great-grandparents or grandparents came to the US and struggled. But many of them, it was very difficult for them to make the connection to contemporary immigration, and how the struggles of contemporary immigrants, who are mostly black and brown today, were not that much different in some ways, or the reasons why people were coming were not that much different in some ways than why some of the old people came back then, right? For escaping religious persecution, coming because there was economic hardship, and they were, coming to the United States to have better economic life. And it was very hard to do those dialogues because it was always where the old immigrants were good immigrants, and the new immigrants are bad immigrants, right? This kind of bad and good immigrant dichotomy was then always about old and new. And that still exists today in terms of immigration policies, right? Old immigrants are good, new immigrants are bad, criminal immigrants, undocumented immigrants are bad, people who come here illegally are good. So these are the things that still are in the conversation in communities and society. And yet the U.S., we know the U.S. is a nation of immigrants, but the immigration system, historically and even today, and through the kind of criminal legal system, is a system of racialized violence and exploitation defined by capitalism and colonialism. And this is always met with ideas of racialization and assimilation, people trying to assimilate. It's always been criminalization and othering, and there's always been resistance to it. Since the time when there has been immigration laws and since the time there has been otherization, there always has been resistance in the form of social movements that do mass mobilizations, that try to do comprehensive immigration policy reforms through today's sanctuary city policies that are really in danger right now, and also calling for abolition of detention centers that are for-profit prisons, basically. And those for-profit detention centers are growing and getting stronger by the day. So, the profits are going into the hands of, again, the technocrats and the oligarchs that are in cahoots with the administration. And under today's fascistic and authoritarianism, which has really been on the rise all over the world, right? I think it was yesterday or the day before we heard about the Japan also went to the right-wing government. So this is something that is happening all over the world, and in the US taking that also step is really bad news for so many people, not just in the US, but across the world, and the reverberations are going to be felt for many years to come. But today, in today's world, and Sandy talked about a lot of this, I'm not going to go into it, but the ICE raids and detention centers, 80% of ICE detainees were held in facilities run by for-profit entities, $45 billion for building new immigration detention centers, including family detention facilities, 265% annual budget increase in the ICE's current detention budget, which is really incredibly high. They're picking people off the streets and disappearing them. This is around, for Palestinian rights work. But who is welcome? South African rights are welcome into this country, right? This is who is okay to be here, but not the brown and working class immigrants who are coming here and actually making the country what it is and building the country. So there's also Indian undocumented immigration is growing, but what we have also known, because we were talking about caste today, and then I'm going to go into that, and part of that is is part of the Indian immigration to this country. India has become probably like the third largest undocumented population in this country now, which is quite staggering. And we have known recently also, I think it was through Palash's presentation, we saw that anti-immigrant racism is also growing. So as kind of the white supremacist rhetoric rises, and we heard earlier is that racism against all people is growing, and anti-immigrant racism is growing. There was a recent study done that showed that even on X, there's posts about 680 high engagement posts that were analyzed in this report that amassed about 280 million views that looked at how online racism was growing against Indian communities. And we've seen incidences not just on X, but other places where Indian immigrants are being attacked everywhere in this country in different kind of places. In August, this report showed that there was a 5-fold spike in anti-Indian hate compared to in July, coinciding with India-US tariff tensions. And it also revealed that expulsion-themed rhetoric accounted for nearly 70% of the data gathered by this report. So resentment about kind of Indians holding H-1B visas and STEM jobs serving as kind of key drivers of Indian kind of portrayed as job stealers. So this is kind of happening everywhere. But also with this, we know that far-right hate against many people and many communities is growing, right? There's anti-Semitism that's growing, Islamophobia is growing, anti-Muslim sentiment is part of that. And the rhetoric and proposed kind of executive orders that are coming from the government are part of this and growing hatred. So this is, when you think about the Indian immigrant community, Indians actually still has constituted one of the fastest growing immigrant populations in the United States, increasing from 0.6 million in 1990 to 3.2 million in 2022, which is an undocumented population which has grown so much. And so this is something that we need to understand now in the current context, but what has led to this, and how do we kind of understand this current context in the historical trajectory of how Indian Americans have come to this country, how Indian Americans have been racialized, and how caste actually fits into that is something that we need to think about. The evolution of over time of kind of racial formations has resulted in differential and changing racialization of South Asians in the United States with respect to kind of Sikhs and Hindus and Muslims and others. In this area itself and many parts of the country, Sikh communities were among the earliest South Asian immigrants that came to the United States. They were actually then called Hindus when they first came. But I think Sandy referred to this in terms of Indian immigrants trying to be white. Just almost 100 years ago, I think many people know this, Bhagat Singh Thind, when he came to this country, he wanted to claim citizenship, and he claimed that because he was a high caste Hindu, full Indian blood, that qualified him to be a white person. So this claim to, because of somebody's caste that makes them a white person, the claim that for citizenship has been existing not just today in this country, but 100 years ago. Bhagat Singh Thind claimed this because he claimed that as a high-class Indian person, he was basically white. 5 minutes. Okay. So the fact that 100 years ago this was being claimed to now fast forward to today, Hindu supremacists kind of represent in this country the kind of the biggest way that, the similar to Bhagat Singh Thind, kind of claiming because they're high caste, because they're superior to other communities, other Muslim communities, Sikh communities, oppressed caste communities, that they are similar to white, right? They're similar to kind of the right-wing, white supremacist people, and so they're making these alignments with MAGA, far-right, and we've seen this in the last few years. I think people talked about it in different places earlier today about how Kash Patel is part of the FBI. Hindu supremacist organizations have been making alignment with Lucy Gabbard, who's part of the administration now. J.D. Vance's wife is Indian, and all these people are also all high caste, right? They've come here through multi-generational advantages, who've been able to come to this country and take advantage of their caste positions to be able to come to this country and find positions in academia, find positions in technology and finances to be able to be part of a certain kind of class position, and then claim also that they can be part of this kind of white supremacist framework as well. So Hindu supremacists represent this kind of position, and it's a confused space right now because now we're in a place where there is a difference between Modi and India, and there is also the H-1B visa controversy. So the Hindu supremacists are in a place where they don't know what to do, right? They've been making alliances with the MAGA far right by aligning with them around affirmative action. They're making alliances with the MAGA far right by aligning with them around critical race theory, now calling for critical caste theory questions, right? They've been making alliances with MAGA far right on many of these questions, and they're in a confused position right now about what to do. And so I think the question, because I only have 5 minutes and there are so many things I want to talk about, but the question for us, as kind of Indian Americans, the answer, I think Sandy talked about this as well, the answer for us is really unity, right? When there is a multiracial far right coming together to form alliances and against kind of the more progressive left forces, the only answer, I think Roja brought up the work that we're doing with Saveda, which is a coalition with AKSC, India Civil Watch International, Hindus for Human Rights, Vivek is here, the Solidarity Forum, who are coming together to say that the only answer to Hindu supremacist rise in the US is for a multi-faith, intercaste, anti-caste coalition to come together and fight the supremacist far right. And the only answer to the white supremacist far right also is to say that as communities who are targeted, we need to come together in unity to form alliances and form movements so that we can build that force to be reckoned with in the U.S. And I think that's something that Sandy is working with in terms of the local. There's a lot of local work that can be done, but nationally, organizations are calling for alliances around many different factors. And one of the ways that we're working on with Saveda is to say that at this time when Indian American immigrants are being also attacked, when Hindu right claims that that's a Hinduphobia, that we reject that kind of weaponization of Hinduphobia, right? Because Hindu far right is using that to really call attention to say that actually this is an attack on us and not claiming to the fact that a lot of the anti-caste mobilizations, when they arise, that's when the Hindu supremacists call for Hindu phobia, right? So we need to reject that weaponization and say that at this point, when Indian Americans and immigrants are attacked in mass, that all of us together need to come together and oppose white supremacist framework. And so I just want to stop there, and I'm sure there's a lot of questions that are going to come up, and we can answer that.